I come from a family with a lot of abuse and rage. And by the time I got abstinent and sober in 1977, at the age of 32, I was suffering from a whole long list of maladies. I had bulimia, but I didn't know it then because nobody was talking about bulimia. 4'11". At the time that I got abstinent and sober, I weighed 183 pounds. And now I weigh 101 pounds. I was cutting, mutilating myself, which was quite socially difficult because I had already been teaching high school for, I forget, 4 years, I think. I taught high school English in Massachusetts for, ended up 34 years, but the first 4 years, 5 years, something like that, I was cutting. And I was getting up in the middle of the night and drinking mustard and vinegar and water to make myself throw up after binges. I was trying to do Weight Watchers for the zillionth time. And so I wasn't keeping a lot of what we would call binge foods in the house. And there were no microwaves then. There were no cell phones. There was no internet. So therefore, no email, no GreyNet, no international network of GreySheeters. And I had not heard anybody else talk about bulimia except myself. I tried to talk about that at my Weight Watcher meeting, and my Weight Watcher lecturer was shocked. She was shocked to hear what I was eating in the middle of the night and how much. 3 or 4 years later, when I had 3 or 4 years of back-to-back abstinence, I sponsored her daughter, and her daughter weighed, I think, close to 350 pounds. So I think she might have seen some eating disorder in her own house. But at the time, it sounded like I was like the weirdo in the group. I had tried a lot of different kinds of psychotherapy. I don't come from a religious background at all, not whatsoever. I come from a Jewish family by the culinary was Jewish. The Yiddishisms were Jewish. The jokes were Jewish. There was no religion. And nor did I ever acquire any religion, although in my early abstinence and sobriety, I tried every goddamn thing I possibly could to help myself calm down. Once I put down the food, according to the GreySheet program, began to weigh and measure my food without exception, no matter what. Even when there was a fire in the house, even when somebody died, even when I ended up in the ER with some kind of an emergency, even when it was socially unacceptable. Once I started doing that, I was pretty wired and panicky and angry and distrustful. And I had been taught from an early age really not to listen to anyone. My father was a control freak, and my mother had control problems as well. The attempt in the family was to acculturate me to listen to them and obey them and ignore everyone else. Ignore my teachers, ignore my little friends, ignore the neighbors. But I actually was very fortunate because I was defiant and individualistic from an early age. And I think that's what saved me from some of the mental illness in the family, because I have one sister who's, I think she's 4 years younger than I am. And we rarely speak, like maybe once in a few years. And she grew up very, very acquiescent, and I grew up quite defiant. And so I was punished frequently for being defiant. Once I got abstinent, I think in retrospect, that was helpful to me because people said, what are you doing? That kind of diet doesn't work. You can't eliminate certain foods completely. what are you going to do about the banquet for the retiring superintendent? How are you going to celebrate your birthday? Whatever. What about happy hour? I said no to happy hour. I said no to the superintendent's banquet. This is in the early years. No to the superintendent's banquet because they told me I couldn't bring my own food. And the eating before or after, I don't know, didn't even occur to me. I finally got absent. I met a small group of people who started the original Saturday morning meeting. There were a small group of people, and there were some people in OA who were hangers-on because they had the idea, or maybe I should say the fantasy, that they could pick up what they saw as willpower, but keep eating whatever it was that they, I have to eat this because I'm Italian, I have to have an extra meal because I'm hypoglycemic. People had many, many reasons, many beliefs. It doesn't matter what I eat as long as I pray and work the steps. There were many beliefs like that. So these people came to that original Saturday morning meeting. But that Saturday morning meeting, that small group, I did not start that group, but I was a very early member. That group was determined to draw a line between what was OA and what was GreySheet. So the lines we drew were, you can share at our meeting, but if you're not GreySheet abstinent, we don't want to hear about your other food plan. And you cannot sponsor at our meeting, and if you're not GreySheet abstinent for at least 90 days, and you can't qualify at our meeting, we don't want to hear your story unless you're GreySheet abstinent for at least 90 days. And I tried it. I tried it the way I tried Weight Watchers and hypnosis and diet pills. That was when I was like 13 years old when I took diet pills. That was a fast fail because I was already hyper and paranoid, and that really made me cuckoo. I knew that even though I was not very smart at that age. There was something they were selling called AYDS in those days. It was candy that you could eat supposedly to make your belly feel full so you wouldn't overeat. I ate those by the case. When I finally got abstinent, I had a closet shelf full of that stuff. And, I could come up with, also, eventually, in a Gestalt therapy group, I met a girl who was bulimic, a teeny tiny little girl. She told me she was in OA. I said, she was probably weighed what I weigh now. And she said, oh, that's because I take Epicac after binges. So then I started taking Epicac instead of mustard and vinegar and water. Epicac is very tricky for a compulsive eater who likes the sweet things because it's very sweet when it goes down, and then it makes you really sick. That's when I was 183 pounds taking Epicac in the middle of the night. So anyway, I tried all those things. And I also tried some sensible things like Gestalt therapy. I tried Rogerian therapy for quite a while. And actually, Carl Rogers, the originator of Rogerian therapy, his daughter, Natalie, was my therapist. She knew a goddamn thing about compulsive eating, but she was a very kind person. She used to tell me, Nora, if you come, therapy was at her house. She used to say, Nora, if you come to my house and you're early, help yourself to whatever you want in the refrigerator. Meanwhile, I was saying, Natalie, this is what I'm eating in the middle of the night. What other sensible things did I do? Nothing has occurred to me, right? Weren't too many sensible things I was doing, except I stayed in school. I got my bachelor's degree. I flunked out of my master's degree the first time. I picked it up later when I had 20 years of sobriety and abstinence. I got myself a job. And in those days, some of the GreySheeters were saying it's not important what you do for work. All you need is vegetable money, stay home, put your bedroom slippers on. I had the thought from the early time of my abstinence and sobriety that no matter what job I did, I had done in college and high school a lot of waitressing, and I grew up in a very sexist culture. So, the stuff that girls did, like babysitting, that kind of thing. And I had the idea that no matter what job I did, I would probably be a misfit, because I was really a misfit in those days. And meanwhile, I had this teaching job that was quite a lucrative job in what was then a very stable school. And I stayed with that job through the early years, when a lot of people were saying, you should quit, this happened, that happened. And I had, like, even my nerves had nerves. I was just, I thought, if you had, in those days, if you had investigated my behavior and my psyche from a modern perspective, you might say I was on the autism spectrum, because every noise, every light, every harsh word, drove me crazy. And at the same time, overreacting to harsh words, I had like the biggest freaking mouth in the world and was annoying everybody. So anyway, I got abstinent and sober despite all that. And I paid attention to the directions. And there were things I heard that I tried out in the early years that I no longer believe are viable for me. Like, I don't believe that there's a kind God who is ordaining what's going to happen to me, that everything happens to me for a reason, that if there's a crisis, the thing to do is to pray and wait for God to take care of it. I'm like, first do the strategies, have your plan A, plan B, plan C, and if all else fails, like I had a few years ago, I had an emergency appendectomy. That's when I pray, like when they're wheeling me into the OR and there's nothing left. Nothing else to do, not bother the sponsor again, nothing. So anyway, I'm abstinent, and it's thrilling to be abstinent in this way. It's thrilling to be abstinent for a long, long time and to be over the withdrawal and to have I've made now a lot of good choices in my life, even though I was really screwing up before age 32. Now I'm 77. I'm a weightlifter. I bike 30 miles a week with my husband. I do yoga. We have an indoor pool where I live now. I went from like not having any money and bouncing checks all over town. Now we live in a house in California, a condo in California, where we could see the ocean from our deck. And with an indoor pool, so I work out in the indoor pool every day. I just came from the indoor pool, singing to myself in the pool. It's a 55 plus community, which really means like 70 plus for most people. And everyone thinks when they buy here, they're going to use the pool. Nobody comes to the pool. I'm in there by myself singing and having a great time. So that's my story. I have a very happy life today. When things happen, and crises happen, of course, in everyone's life, I think, they happen one at a time, usually. One at a time, and I deal with them one at a time. Very fortunate, because I have a very intelligent husband who's also a very good strategizer in emergencies. And just for an example, I had what they thought was a stroke a couple of weeks ago. It was like totally weird, because I'm a really healthy, fit person. But anyway, I have AFib, and I had this thing that they thought was a stroke. I was rushed to the hospital. I'm not going to tell the whole long story, but I ended up in the hospital for 4 days. My husband brought all my food to the hospital. My husband weighed and measured my food, and everything came to the hospital. I had asked for a few things, but everything came to the hospital with, this is 3 ounces, this is 12 ounces, all right, plus napkins, plus silverware, plus a plate for each meal, plus my laptop and my iPad and my iPhone, anything I wanted. I mean, this man is like unbelievable. After I had so many bad boyfriends, I'm not even talking, before I got abstinent, 183 pounds, I wasn't having sex. But after I got abstinent, the first 10 or 12 years, I was meeting all my boyfriends in AA. That was bad. That was really bad, girls. The stories I could tell you. I haven't run out of time yet. So I fell madly in love with a pedophile who was incarcerated for life. He got a parole. He got out for a few months, but it's a long story, but anyway, he got a parole. He got out. It was supposed to be a release. No, for a week. He kidnapped some little boy and took him to some cottage in New Jersey and was arrested again. And as far as I know, he's been in prison. This is the boyfriends I had before. Okay, I had a boyfriend who worked on a garbage truck. Now I have a husband who's a scientist, who loves classical music, knows more about literature than I do, and I'm a retired English teacher. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to say everything is perfect and wonderful, because there's stuff that goes on in every life, but I have a very happy marriage and happy home life because I'm abstinent, because I learned to step out of the way of myself, because I learned from the steps and from other people in the rooms that first of all, you look at yourself. How am I? Is my time up? I could talk forever. I learned not to cause my own problems a little bit at a time. I mean, I still do sometimes. All right, that event that I had a couple of weeks ago, I know why that happened. I know why my heart started racing. I know why suddenly for 30 minutes, I was unable to talk or read. I could look at sentences on the page. I could not, it was like I forgot how to read. That's why they rushed me to the hospital. I was drinking so much caffeine. I just love hyping up my adrenal system. And the reason I was drinking so much caffeine, because the cardiologist has suggested to me that I cut back on my caffeine. So I started drinking decaf instead. But I thought, decaf? Boy, this stuff is good. We were brewing our own decaf. So I was drinking like 16 times as much decaf as regular. And then I had something else in it that had caffeine. Anyway, long story short, I'm still going to listen to the neurologist. I'll do what she says. But and I had a MRI on my head and it was totally normal. They said, Nora, you most definitely did not have a stroke. We think you have a form of epilepsy, an adult onset epilepsy. Later, after I got out of the hospital, Wes and I started reading about it. See that caffeine, only an addict could drink as much caffeine as I was drinking before that happened. I'm just saying, I still get in my way sometimes, but at least it's a one at a time thing and I can be sensible. The next day, I started measuring how much caffeine I was having, and it went from this much to this much. So that's my story. Thank you for giving me the chance to share with you. It's fascinating learning how this works, although I have no understanding of it whatsoever yet. And I'll pass the meeting back to whoever is leading. Diana, is that you?